coconut oil. So I'm going to get my burner started here. Turned on to just about, a medium-high heat. So I've got a teaspoon of coconut oil that will plop in. And we'll wait for that to kind of melt. After that, we're going to whisk in some turmeric. So I've got ground turmeric. If you have fresh turmeric, that's fantastic. I sometimes use fresh turmeric. You would just grate this, and you would probably use 2 to 3 times the amount. So in the recipe in the book, it calls for 1 tablespoon. So you'd use 2 tablespoons probably of the fresh but grated. So you could use something like a microplane to do that. Awesome. You can just throw this in the freezer if you're not going to use it right away, and then just grate it as needed. And it's so good in curries, but also warm beverages like this. And it's very high. Turmeric in particular is very high in antioxidants, specifically curcumin, which has been shown to be a good part of an anti-inflammatory diet, but also an anti-cancer diet as well. So just about a tablespoon of that, or 2 tablespoons of fresh. We've got some black pepper. I always couple my turmeric with black pepper because it helps with the bioavailability of the curcumin that's present in the turmeric. So make sure you give a little kind of pinch of that. And it also adds kind of like a nice spicy sensation to any sort of dish. And then we're also going to add a little bit of cardamom as well. Cardamom is kind of a traditional Indian spice. So lovely, smells fragrant, kind of perfumey, a little bit flowery. So I don't like to use too much of it because I don't want it to taste like your grandmother's perfume. So I use it very sparingly, but it adds a nice kind of depth of flavor. And then for sweetener, we're going to use good old maple syrup because we are in Canada. And I mean, you can use whatever sweetener you'd like, or you could completely omit the sweetener if you're not into it. That's fine too. And then in terms of milk, I have, this is soy milk. So this is an unsweetened organic soy milk. Whatever milk you have on hand or you choose to drink in your household works. Oat milk is really nice as well. It's really, really rich and creamy. But we generally use unsweetened organic soy because it's a complete protein. So soy has all 9 essential amino acids that your body needs. It often gets a bad rap. I don't have time to get into it today, but if you do your research, it is a good healthy component of an anti-inflammatory diet, but also an anti-cancer diet. Okay, so while I blabbed on, the coconut oil is now melted. So I'm going to add the turmeric. So I said about a tablespoon of dry, and then we'll add a little bit of black pepper. Turn this down a bit. You can see kind of cooking out a little bit there, and you want it to be nice and fragrant. Okay, great. And then I am going to add a little bit of fresh ginger. Ginger contains something called gingerol that is also a good component of an anti-inflammatory and an anti-cancer diet. So I'm just going to grate a little bit of that. I love using microplanes or rasps. I call it my flavor enhancer because you can add all sorts of flavor using things like ginger, garlic, zest, lime zest, lemon zest, orange zest, that sort of thing, and adds flavor without added fat, salt, or sugar. I should say unhealthy fats, because we do want fats. We want good healthy fats, but we don't want the ones that are trans fats or saturated fats as much anyways. Okay, cool. Get that going there. I am going to use my whisk, and I'm going to whisk in my milk now. Oh, it makes such a beautiful color. If you've never worked with turmeric before, you may not know that it stains very easily, so it's good to be extra careful with it. Generally, foods that are bright and beautiful have high levels of antioxidants, so it's a good thing, but you just want to be careful with things like turmeric and beets because they don't come out. I wish you could smell what that smells like, but you can see kind of the beautiful color that it's making. It's a bright, kind of subdued but bright yellow. Cool. And the smell is amazing. So you just want to kind of bring that to a simmer, and I'm going to whisk in the maple syrup. Now, if you had a frother, excellent. You could froth this and it would be nice and light and extra creamy. If you don't, no worries. You can just whisk it. That works too. A hand immersion blender may also add a little bit of lightness to it as well. These are great to make ahead, and then you can just pop it in, say, a mason jar, pop it into the fridge, and when you're ready to drink them, you can just heat it up on the stove, or if it's a warm fall day, you could have it as a cool iced beverage too. Awesome! Great. So, one trick, if you are peeling, say, ginger or turmeric, using your spoon to peel it as opposed to your knife, you will maximize the amount of ginger and or turmeric that you get out of it. Notice how I chose to peel the ginger instead of the turmeric right now because it really does stain. You could have you could wear gloves if you wanted to. If you didn't care, then go to town. Yeah, see how easy that is? And then you've got a little bit of skin left over. If you were making a stock, you could use that depending on the type of stock that you're making. Say if it was a faux, or you're making stock that you're going to be using in a curry or something that has ginger in it, or a ginger tea. You could use these just to boil with water and make a nice ginger tea. Again, you're getting that gingerol, which is a good component of an anti-inflammatory and an anti-cancer diet. Okay, so we've got that. Check. Get my mug here. It's coming to a simmer. Lovely. Let's clear some space. Yum, it smells so good. I wish you could smell everything. Next year, we'll do this in person and you can have samples. Okay, great. So let's ladle that out. And you can see the bright, beautiful yellow color. My grandmother would hate this color. She hated yellow. Funny things you remember, right? Okay. Cool. This might be a fun thing to drop off on your neighbor's porch too. If you make a really big batch, you have it, and then you can share it. The recipe in the book, you can make 6 servings or 24 servings. So the cookbook, I should say, is all about communal eating, so eating together. At Gilda's Club, I run supper club programs where we all sit down at long tables and share health-promoting meals. And oftentimes some really wonderful, sometimes hard, but really wonderful, deep conversations come out of those meals. And that's kind of part of the programming, is to provide that emotional and social, as well as the nutritional support. Right now we're doing online virtual demonstrations like this, which is wonderful. We're able to infiltrate everyone's homes, but we do obviously miss the community meals. Okay, and there you are. Cheers. I'm gonna try a little bit. You have to try it, see if it's the right sweetness. Perfect. Okay, cool. So we're gonna make sure that comes to heat. So for this recipe, there's all sorts of yummy things. Again, focusing on fall fresh as much as possible. So we're getting, in this one in particular, we're getting orange veggies into us. So sweet potatoes I've added to the recipe because normally it just calls for white potatoes. But we want that beta carotene, we want that vitamin A. We've also got some corn here. So if you're able to still find some local corn, great. I wasn't able to, so I'm just using fresh. Okay, so, and of course, onions, celery, carrots, garlic are good additions as well. So wait for that to heat up. That's grapeseed oil. I'm using grapeseed oil because it has a neutral flavor, and it also has a higher smoke point, which means it won't smoke as easily as, say, olive oil when you're cooking. So olive oil I generally save for dressings because we don't want our oil to smoke because it increases carcinogens in our diet, which is not cool. Okay, so I've got the oil going there. We're gonna add an onion. So onions are a great start to any sort of stew or chowder. I don't know if you can see me here. I want to make sure that you can see everything I'm doing. So you can replicate it at home. So I've got one small onion here. Okay, cool. One small onion. If you've never cut an onion in your life before, today's the day. We just peel off as much of the skin as we possibly can. And I save this for stock. I make my own stock. Saves you money, and it's also better for you. No sodium, high in nutrients, and you know what's going into it. So I save these peels. As long as they're clean, making sure that they're clean, of course. Great, save those. If we're dicing, we've cut it in half, we've left the root intact, and then we're cutting horizontally on the onion, but we're not cutting through the root. You want the root to stay intact so that you can then do a horizontal cut and then a dice. So tip to heel with your knife, making sure you're pinching using that kind of pincer grasp like this. And saving the ends for stock. So again, you can see it's kind of held together, but still fans out. And then one horizontal. If you're doing a finer dice, you would do 2 horizontal cuts. Okay, and as when we're talking about cutting and learning how to dice and cut, I always say, and this was back when I was learning, my dad was teaching me how to pitch. You always want to ensure that your accuracy comes before your speed. So make sure that you are you're practicing first, and it does take some practice to get a little bit faster. Get that out of the way there. Next up, we're going to do our garlic. So, garlic and onions are aluminum vegetables that, or allium vegetables, I should say. Sorry, I misspoke there. Allium vegetables that are a good component of an anti-cancer diet, an anti-inflammatory diet. They're high in fiber. They're prebiotics, so that means that they help with the growth of the already existing probiotics in your gut. And they just have lots of awesome flavors. Garlic in particular contains what's referred to as allicin, which is a good component of an anti-cancer diet. Very high in antioxidants. Okay, so you see that what I did there with the garlic. Again, we're saving the garlic for stock. I'll do that again. So I have a clove, and I'm going to cut the end off, and I'm going to smash it a little bit. Another good thing to do with garlic, if you're wanting to get all of that allicin that's available, is smashing it and then letting it set aside for about 5 to 10 minutes, and that actually increases the absorption of the allicin that is present. And then we're just going to do a mince. So the recipe calls for 3 cloves. I've added 4 medium-sized cloves. I mean, you can add however much garlic you like. We like garlic in our household. It's also good, I mean, it's an immune-boosting food, along with onions, partially because they are prebiotics. So prebiotics, again, feeds the probiotics in our gut. And if we have, more probiotics present, that helps with the absorption of vitamins and minerals. It helps with keeping things moving. It also helps with our immune system as well. So garlic, onions, get it into you. Unless, of course, it is not within your religion, then don't get it into you, and you can omit it and use something else that would add flavor. Okay, cool. And with garlic and onions, you want to make sure that you're cleaning your cutting board, because you don't want, if you're cutting apples afterwards or some sort of fruit, that's going to stick to your fruit, and your fruit is going to taste like onions and garlic, which maybe you want, maybe you don't. But I highly recommend making sure that you're keeping your space in your cutting board clean. Okay, so again, I wish you could smell that wonderfulness. I'll show you what I do with my stock. Where are you? Oh, over here. Okay, cool. So I saved the ends of onions, garlic, celery, the skins of the garlic, and then what I do is I throw it into a pot with water, throw a bay leaf in there, some thyme, maybe a couple black peppercorns, and I let it simmer for about 45 minutes. Then I strain everything out, and then I have myself a nutrient-dense, no sodium stock that you can utilize, you know, in soups, stews, whatever you need. Wherever it calls for water, you can actually add this, and you're adding a little bit more nutrients to your dish. So that's that. Things to add into stocks. So onions, garlic, carrots, celery. I put a little bit of sweet potato in this one, thyme, bay leaves, peppercorns. You generally want to stick to the white parts of the leeks. Nothing green, really green, like any sort of kale leaves or chard, makes it bitter and does not taste nice. Okay, broccoli I generally leave out. Cauliflower, because it then takes on that sulfuric kind of smell, so not good. So leave that out if you can. Okay, this going. Now I'm going to add some diced carrots and celery, high in fiber. As a general rule of thumb, if it doesn't have fiber in it, I don't consume it, which means all plants contain fiber, and most, well, animal products in particular don't. So I generally try to focus on the whole plant-based foods. It's kind of in accordance to Canada's food guide. It's focusing on mostly plant-based foods, and then also the dietary recommendations for cancer prevention, type 2 diabetes prevention and management, cardiovascular disease, all that sort of stuff focuses mostly on plants. Which is great and A-okay by me. Okay, so I've got a celery stock here. So I generally will save these for garnish, or you could put it into the stock as well, so you save that. That would be one exception to kind of the leafy greens. The celery leaves are a little less bitter. But you want to utilize all of the celery, so you can see I'm using the top of the celery as well. Okay, pop that into your pot. And I'm just going to tip this so you can kind of see. I know you can see the steam everywhere, but you can see how I'm just lightly sauteing the veg there. Great, great, great. Just a little bit. So again, it's at a medium-high. Next up, we're going to add in some cumin. So cumin's one of my favorite spices. It adds kind of a robust, meaty kind of flavor to a dish. So I use it with like lentils and quinoa to make like a faux ground beef. I use it in dishes like this. It goes really well with things like corn and black beans. Got that in there. And it's about 2 teaspoons of cumin, and I'm going to do some paprika. This is a smoked paprika. You could just use regular paprika, or you could use a spicy paprika if you'd like. And that is, don't want to lead you astray, that's 2 teaspoons, about 2 teaspoons. Yum! Oh, so fragrant and lovely. Adds like an oomph of flavor without, again, added salt, sugar, or unhealthy fats. I love using spices and herbs, as well as fresh herbs in my dishes, again, to add flavor without added fat, salt, or unhealthy fat, salt or sugar. So we're building flavor here. We've got that, oh, it smells so good. I keep wafting it to you. That's what I do in my demonstrations at Gilda's. I'm like, can you smell that back there? Okay, got that. Next, we're going to add the potatoes. In the recipe, it calls for 2 cups of white potatoes. I've decided to do some white potatoes and then some sweet potatoes, because why not? They add extra, it adds extra beta carotene, as well as just a beautiful color and flavor. So throw that in there. Again, lots of fiber. I leave the skins on. These ones are organic in particular. You don't have to buy organic. That's not a rule of thumb. You know, if that's not accessible to you or you can't find it, don't stress about it. I just, just make sure you wash them really well, scrub them. And I leave the skins on because it adds extra flavor, or a little bit of extra flavor, kind of a more like earthy flavor, but it adds a nice texture as well as really increasing the fiber that's present in the dish. And it also happens to be easier to leave the skins on. Okay, cool. Great. This guy out of the way here. All right, so we've got those done. Actually, we'll get them right out of the way. Okay, so next I'm going to add some diced tomatoes. If you happen to still have some tomatoes, some seasonal tomatoes, and you don't know what to do with them, this is the perfect dish for that. Throw them in. I just have no sodium canned diced tomatoes, and I'm throwing those in. If you can find jarred, even better, or a BPA-free can, that's great too. But if you just, happen to have a can in your pantry, even better. This is kind of a clean at the fridge. It can be a clean at the fridge chowder if need be. Okay, cool. Bring it to a boil. Now I'm going to add some of the stock. Get that going. So it's 3 cups of stock. Put that right in there. Great. Here. And coconut milk. So you can use coconut milk. This it's a high fat content, so it adds like a really nice creamy mouthfeel to the chowder. I generally use coconut milk, unsweetened obviously, for any chowders because you can't taste the coconut. Really, it's not super predominant, and it adds such a nice, rich kind of buttery flavor to it. But whatever milk you happen to have on hand will work as well. Just note that it may not be, if you're just using regular milk, it may not be as creamy. But again, whatever you happen to have on hand is great. Out of the way. Perfect. Okay. And then we've got some black pepper, some salt. I always add the salt at the end. Oftentimes if you add it in the middle, it can kind of dissipate and it's not as predominant. Also too, we want to try and minimize the amount of sodium that we consume. So I generally add it closer to the end. Okay, and then of course the corn. So at this point, your potatoes should be fork tender. You're adding all this stuff in. And you're really just kind of heating through the coconut milk and the corn. So you're bringing it to a simmer. And then you're either serving it and shutting it off, or you're letting it cool. And then storing it after it's been properly cooled, either in the fridge, and this will last about 4 or 5 days in the fridge, or if you'd like to freeze it, it'll last up to 2 months in the freezer if frozen properly. And that just means it's cooled down before you put it into the freezer. It's completely cooled down, and then you're storing it in the freezer before you freeze it. Okay, little pinch of cayenne. This is optional. We do like it a little bit spicy in this household, so we throw that in there. Cayenne, again, has also been shown to be good for your circulation, so that's great, particularly in the cooler months that we're about to embark upon. Great, and then last but not least, this is one of my faves, is lime. So I always add lime zest to things like chilies or chowders, like this one in particular, this corn chowder, goes nicely in. If we're talking, any sort of soups or stews, adding a zest in kind of, again, adds an oomph of flavor without added salt, sugar, or unhealthy fats. Also, too, it's been found that there's oils that are located in the skin of the zest of citrus fruit that have been shown to be a good component of an anti-cancer diet as well. Of course, you want to make sure that they're super, super, super clean before you put them in, because sometimes with citrus fruit there's a layer of wax on them. So just kind of washing them with a little bit of lukewarm water will help with that. Help with removing that. So that's in there. And then I'm going to juice it. So if you're not going to use your zest right away, say this recipe just called for lime juice, I would throw the zest into a reusable container into the freezer, and then use it later on for smoothies or soups or cookies. Something again that you want to add a little bit of flavor easily, very easily. I love adding lemon zest to cookies and cakes. It really brings out the flavor and brightens the baked good. Okay, cool. So you could use a reamer here. I'm just using my hand. You could use a reamer or a spoon, whatever you like. My hands are clean, always, always, always. If you were making this for someone else, you probably would want to use a reamer or a spoon. It's our garnish, cilantro, so we're gonna let this come to a boil. More of a simmer than a boil. So, lid on. And we'll check back in a few minutes. So this one is really a really fun recipe that I make actually components of it all the time. And usually I use sweet potatoes. So it's usually it's called the sweet potato parfait, but instead I'm going to show you how you can use any root vegetable with it. So today we're going to be using a butternut squash. So pull that out. Butternut squash actually from my family farm, which is kind of fun. Again, we want to have a clean workspace before we start. Okay, so in the cookbook, there is a recipe for granola. I have pre-made this in advance, again, to save on time because we don't have a ton of time together. We're here for a good time, not a long time. But you're welcome to buy, store-bought, or use store-bought granola if you don't want to make your own. This one, to make this one, all you do is you take rolled oats, you puree sweet potatoes that have been cooked with a little bit of maple syrup, spices, and then you mix it all in together with pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds, pecans, dates, and then you line a baking sheet with parchment paper, pop it in the oven, and then you're essentially drying it, checking on it every once in a while, stirring it, making sure that it's drying, and that pieces around the outside aren't burning. And then you have a delicious low sugar granola, because oftentimes the cereals or the granolas that you find in the grocery store are very, very high in added sugar, which we don't necessarily want for our breakfast because it kind of spikes our blood sugar levels and then they drop afterwards. We want a breakfast that's high in protein, low in sugar, and uses whole or complex carbohydrates. So there you have it. That recipe's in the cookbook under the sweet potato parfaits. That's already done. Check. Did that for you. Ahead of time. Wish I could sample it. But what we're going to do now is we're going to make the kind of the puree that goes in with the parfait. So again, as I said, I've done butternut squash instead of sweet potatoes. So all I did was cut a butternut squash in half and then in quarters, face down again on a baking sheet with parchment paper, and baked it in the oven for about, depending on the size of the butternut squash, for about 45 minutes at 375. And then you want to just make sure that you're poking holes in it as well with, say, a knife or a fork to get that to cook a little faster. And then when it comes out, this is how it should look a little bit. This is, you can see the skin still on. I'm going to use the skin. You could take the skin off if you'd like, but you're welcome to keep it on as well. Again, added fiber. So you just want to make sure the tippy top of the squash is not in there because that doesn't blend up very nice. Okay, cool. So butternut squash or sweet potatoes or carrots or pumpkin, whatever you like, whatever fall fresh food that you would like to use that. Okay, and maple syrup. So we've got about 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, a little bit of nutmeg here. So this is the part where you can get creative with spices. In the cookbook, it shows you, measurements, but if you like to be creative, this is where you can get creative with the spices. So I've got nutmeg, this is cinnamon. I'm using cardamom again. You could use allspice, you could use cloves, you could use just a pumpkin spice that's already pre-made if you wanted to, that might be easier. A little bit of vanilla. You can omit this if you don't have it or if it's not accessible to you. Vanilla is very pricey these days. you do not need to include that if you don't want to, or you could use, an artificial one would be fine as well. And today I'm using oat milk. The recipe actually calls for coconut milk, but I'm going to use oat milk today. Again, you can use whatever milk you happen to have on hand. Oat milk is very creamy. Just make sure that it's unsweetened, okay? Because otherwise, I mean, in this recipe, a sweetened one would be fine, but again, it would be added sugar that we don't necessarily need. Things like chowders, we don't want to use a sweetened milk because it will ruin the chowder or the stew. So unsweetened, always make sure that it's unsweetened so that you are in control of how much sugar you're putting in. Okay, cool, we've got that, and now we're just gonna zhuzh this up in the blender. My technical culinary term is zhuzhing. Great. So you don't have to have a fancy blender either. A food processor, a hand immersion blender will work, whatever you happen to have on hand. Okay, take this for a ride. Excuse me for a minute. Okay, so if you do leave the skins on, you just want to make sure that they're very, that they're completely combined as much as possible. This is a higher power blender, so it does tend to help a little bit, but you could get a smooth texture just using a regular blender as well. I highly recommend getting one with a taper too, so you can move the, whatever it is you're blending up around. So you can see kind of what that looks like. Perfect. So we'll set that aside. Now, this is where you would assemble. So get this guy out of the way here. And whatever, jar you have, mason jars are really great if you want to do it in advance and you can just put the lid on. It's also kind of COVID friendly too if you were having, or if your area was allowed to have a socially distant gathering. You could do the mason jars in advance and then people just pick it up with their own cutlery and then eat it obviously 6 feet apart. Or you can use, I'm just using kind of an old milkshake glass because I'm going to eat it right after. But these are great to make in advance for breakfast, for snack, for a fancy dinner gathering within your household or a social bubble. Okay. So I'm going to start with the puree. And what I would do if I was making a bunch of these, I would lay out all the jars kind of in an assembly line fashion. Yogurt. So whatever yogurt you like, again, make sure that it's unsweetened. This one is Riviera, and it's a coconut milk one. It is plant-based. They also throw in a pea protein as well, so it's high in protein, which is awesome. And this one's also high in probiotics too. So you really want to be getting, especially this time of year in the fall, we want to be getting lots of pro and prebiotics into us. Garlic, onions, a lot of those immune boosting foods. So B vitamins, magnesium, selenium, zinc. Those are all things that foods you want to be really consuming quite a bit of. So magnesium you can find in things like pumpkin seeds, zinc as well. Selenium you can find in things like Brazil nuts, seeds. Those are really great components of an immune boosting diet. They're also a good component of they're also good for your mental health as well. So we're talking about eating for mental health, foods that are rich in good fats. So nuts and seeds are really great, specifically omega-3 fatty acids. You want to be getting a lot of those, and studies have shown that a high consumption or higher consumption of foods that are rich in omega-3 fatty acids help to reduce the risk of anxiety and depression. So get those into you as much as possible. So that's things like hemp seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds, walnuts. Those are all really high in omega-3 fatty acids. We are plant-based, so we don't consume fish, but if you did consume fish, that's another source of omega-3 fatty acids, but we just will take an algae supplement instead. Okay, cool. So, a little layer of this, and then if you were making these ahead of time, I wouldn't put the granola on now because it will make it soggy. but if you're eating it right away, like I will be soon, I would do a little layer of granola right here, and then another layer of the butternut squash puree, right? Yum. Okay, cool. And then a bit more yogurt. And then actually, I would also add a local seasonal fruit. So I've got apples, which is great. And I'm happy that I cleaned off my cutting board from that garlic and onions. So I just cut it into quarters, and then I'm just taking the core out. Again, I'm leaving the skin on. I've washed these. Fiber is good for you. Has a nice texture, nice crunch. I'll throw that on top, along with some more granola. Yum. This is great just to have as a snack too. I'll put this in a little baggie, reusable obviously, baggie for my son, and he'll just eat it out of the bag. Great. Cool. Doesn't that look beautiful? Okay, oh, and mint. Don't forget the mint. Mint is optional. It's just kind of a garnish. So you can see that. Doesn't that look nice? Serve that to your guests. Beautiful. There we go. Okay. Bowl, check. Garnish, check. Crusty local bread, check. Whole grain. I love these guys. I get a Mama Earth Organics box every week, which I absolutely love. Local organic produce from local farmers, which is great. And they also include Prairie Boy as one of their bakeries that they use, and I love their stuff. So this one is double fermented multigrain. Again, use whatever is available to you. Obviously supporting local as much as you possibly can. I love this one. It's a whole grain and it's fermented. So probiotics and obviously high levels of B vitamins. So we go with whole grain because grains, if they've been processed, the bran is removed, and that's what we want to eat. We want to eat the bran. That's where all the goodies are, the antioxidants, the fiber, the B vitamins. That's what we want to be including. So it's really great to be including whole grains in our diet. So choosing whole grains over processed grains as much as possible for chronic disease prevention and management. Okay, so big old piece of crusty bread, check. Here, yum. I should also mention too, because you're obviously wondering, the dress I'm wearing is actually from a local store here in the East End as well, the Right Side Boutique. Check out that store if you possibly can, and support local. Obviously, all of the clothes that are sold there are ethical, ethically made, ethically sourced, and the owner is just a delight. I love her. And she has awesome stuff, so check that out as well. So as well as supporting, the local food system, we want to be supporting local businesses as well. Okay, cool. So this we've got, now I just need a ladle, one momento. Perfect. Okay, and I'm going to tip this so you can see it as I'm pouring it in. Yum, oh my gosh. In the recipe, this calls to be garnished with chives. If you have some, great. If you don't, I have cilantro here. You could also throw in some leafy greens in there. As a general rule of thumb, I always say you want to get into daily something orange, something green, cruciferous vegetables, so all the sneaky vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, and then a red vegetable as well. So red, red cabbage, red onions, radicchio, that sort of stuff. If you have that on hand or you have access to that, great. And we're just going to garnish with a little bit of cilantro. Yum. Again, this could be something, if you were having or hosting if your area allows it, a socially distant gathering. This is a great one. So the host would be the one who would be serving out the soup, so that, you know, we're minimizing contact. And, you know, people could have it, bring their own bowl. So BYOB, bring your own bowl, and serve out the chowder. Great. Okay, so let's recap. We have our Tumeric Latte. Beautiful. Closer to the camera. Yum. Full of antioxidants. Rich, creamy, comforting, warm, beautiful. We have our chowder, our corn chowder, creamy corn chowder. You could throw some black beans in there too if you wanted to up the protein content, with some whole grain crusty bread. Let's see if you can see that a little bit better. Yum. Great. And last but not least, our butternut squash parfaits. Beautiful. A little bit closer. A little mint garnish there. All stuff from my garden, actually. My garden was well looked after this summer, I will say that for sure. Wonderful. And there you have it. Bon appetit. Lots of stuff that you can make ahead as well if you are busy, and have it in the fridge to set yourself up for success for the week. They're all tasty. They can be, you know, doubled as a lunch or a dinner or a breakfast or a snack or a fancy dessert. Afternoon snack, obviously with something else as well. Evening, it's not going to keep you up because there's no caffeine in it, or kind of a morning wake up of the digestive system. So all wonderful things to include in your diet. I think our time is now done, unfortunately and sadly, but thank you so much for joining me today for the big social, and thank you so much for donating to such a worthy and important cause. Thank you so much, Harmony Community Food Centre and Community Food Centre Canada, for the work that you do. I wish I could do more, but this is my small contribution. And I look forward to seeing hopefully your posts about the dinner, maybe making this on your own, and tagging me in it. So my social handles are at Amy Symington on Twitter, or at Amelia Eats on Instagram, or at the Long Table Cookbook on Instagram as well. And my website's ameliaeats.ca if you want to check that out for more recipes. And obviously, don't forget to check out the Long Table Cookbook. All of my author proceeds go to support the social, emotional, and nutritional programming at Gilda's Club Greater Toronto, just like the Harmony Community Food Centre donations right now mean a significant amount. So thank you for joining me, and have a lovely fall. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from you. Take care. Bye.